Another update that we did just get in, no deputies have been shot at this time, although if you were joining us about 10 minutes ago, our Rick Earl reported from his sources that this suspect has been, quote, unloading on everyone. So we have witnesses reporting up to 100 shots being fired. We do know that this suspect has shot down 2 drones, according to sources. This is the area of North Broad Street, Matilda and Jordan Way, very close to the Allegheny Cemetery and very close again to UPMC Children's, which you can see on the left of your screen there. It is coming from UPMC, the individual being accounted for, but that does not in any way mean the suspect is in custody. No. So we do want to clarify that. At last check, this is still a barricade situation with shots being fired, an exchange of gunfire, and police have to assume this could be going on for quite some time because evacuations have begun. They are asking people right now, particularly in the 4800 block of Broad, shelter in place. We just heard from one woman who was in her basement. They say you can call 911 and then officers will come to safely evacuate you. We do know that at last check, despite how much gunfire there's been out there, no one has been shot. However, Rick had previously reported that a sheriff's deputy fell during an exchange of gunfire. So we are working to find out how that deputy is doing. We have been speaking to a number of individuals impacted by this. A lot of fear out there, a lot of concern. I understand that we do right now have a soundbite with a neighbor named Jerry from across the street there where this is all unfolding. Let's take a listen. Residents in the 4800 block of Broad are being asked to shelter in place. We heard from one woman who was hiding in her basement. She was safely evacuated. If you are in that zone, you can call 911 and an officer will come to your home and safely evacuate you. So certainly officers seem to expect that this could go on for quite some time now, deploying that robot, which is a common thing that we see on SWAT scenes. And they still, as far as we know, have that 3rd drone in the sky, which helps to determine where exactly this individual may be inside of that home. It is now 1 o'clock. We are going to continue our breaking news coverage of a situation that has been ongoing for about 2 hours now. We have been on air for about 90 minutes. We had to remove Chopper 11 from the area because there's just no telling where this man will be firing. Obviously very brazen and still alive. We do want to note that that is always a question when there is an exchange of gunfire and there's a barricade situation. Sometimes law enforcement has to work to determine that, but that is an update that we did just get from one of Rick's sources. Again, people being evacuated in the area there of Broad Street, a big impact. This is very close to Penn Avenue, which has a number of businesses. It's not far from UPMC Children's. We want to take Nicole Ford live. She was the first on the scene there from our crew. Nicole, what are you seeing now? Yeah, and so that would mark 3 hours really that this has been ongoing with law enforcement. Nicole had been speaking with several witnesses, really just a lot of panic out there. She talked to 2 people who ran to the scene and they were on the phone with loved ones in that vicinity. Again, people are now being asked to shelter in place and they will be evacuated. You have to call 911 and then an officer will come to your home. So still just a very active situation here with law enforcement. Now we understand sending in a robot. Nicole was reporting seeing fire hoses, so we're working to find out what that might be for, but we know a drone is in the air as well after 2 others were shot down by the suspect who has an unknown amount of ammunition. And a negotiation now underway. They have a robot ready, which can sometimes enter a home and that can work to see where exactly an individual is. We know that that's also the purpose of a drone. 2 drones were shot down by this suspect here, who neighbors are now reporting had been squatting in that home for several months. This individual shooting at homes too. Originally, we were told by a source that they were, quote, unloading on everyone. You could possibly consider it a miracle that no one, as far as we know, has been shot, despite reports of hundreds of bullets flying throughout the last several hours. We do know, however, that a sheriff's deputy was hurt, had a head injury while diving for cover during the exchange of gunfire. This is certainly far from over, as far as we know, with residents now being actively evacuated in that neighborhood. Want to just mention again how this is a very busy neighborhood. You have so many homes right in the vicinity of where the exchange of gunfire is taking place. There are so many businesses. This is right by Allegheny Cemetery, which butts up to Lawrenceville, right by Penn Avenue, which runs through Lawrenceville, through Garfield, through Blue Bloomfield. Much of that, you're looking at that now actually, is blocked off with police just urging the public, please avoid the area, though we do know there have been a lot of onlookers out there and a lot of people coming who are worried about their family members, talking to their family members on the phone. A lot of just emotional interviews that we've had out there, people very scared as this is seeming to be far from resolved. But it seems law enforcement actually informed neighbors in advance that they were going to be serving this, and you have to wonder if they might have anticipated some sort of violence. We know from witnesses that this individual had a military-style long gun. We are possibly dealing with a skilled shooter who we understand was able to shoot 2 drones out of the sky. So police have deployed another drone, a robot. We understand that a Rook is now being moved into place. We want to send it out to Channel 11's Nicole Ford, one of several reporters live out there for us. So Nicole, do you have a vantage point, I understand, of that? Thank you. And we do know that no one has been shot despite there being so many shots fired. And at last check, the suspect too was alive. That according to a high-ranking source of Chief Investigator Rick Earl. We do, however, know that a sheriff's deputy was injured, suffered a head injury while diving for cover during that exchange of gunfire. The state police had mentioned that they were bringing in additional drones as well. So as they take over this investigation, they will bring in additional resources. We've mentioned this piece of equipment here. We know that there's the Rook, the robot, a lot that police are bringing in, with the idea being that they understood going into this that this could turn violent. So we know that neighbors were apparently informed ahead of this eviction notice being served that it was going to happen, and some left the area because they did have fears about this turning dangerous. Rick Earl just reported that this individual, who we have a name for but are working to officially confirm, does have a criminal background. There were a number of different summary offenses, harassment, but there was a firearms charge that Rick had mentioned. So law enforcement does seem to know that this is someone, or knew in advance that this is someone who could have been armed. Worth noting that despite how many shots have been fired, hundreds possibly, an exchange of gunfire, as far as we know, no one has been shot, and that includes the shooter. At last check, the shooter was believed to be alive and barricaded in that home, still exchanging gunfire. We do know that one sheriff's deputy fell while diving for cover during that exchange and did hurt his or her head. So we are working to find out how they're doing right now. But this is having such a significant impact, causing a lot of trauma for the people who were first sheltering in place. Now people are being evacuated. We know there are a lot of lockdowns at some area schools. We know that UPMC Children's, which is fairly close to where this is happening, does have enhanced security. Yeah, one of the questions that our reporters were asking state police, do we know how many people have been evacuated? Do we know how many people need to be evacuated? And that is still something right now that we are working to find out, especially as there has been a lot of gunfire exchanged in that neighborhood. And as far as we know, no one has been shot. But those evacuations ongoing right now, particularly 4800 block of Broad. If you live there, shelter in place. You can call 911 and an officer will come to your home and safely evacuate you, get you to safety. With that being ongoing, really, police clearly don't know when this may resolve. This is now going on nearly 4 hours, and our crews have been hearing gunshots one after another. I understand that we do have some of that we want to play for you right now. And Rick, so from covering a lot of officer-involved shootings, I do know it is protocol for state police to take over an officer-involved shooting. So might that be what's occurring here? They're anticipating that this will be an officer-involved shooting, that this individual may not survive, and at that point, that's when they step in. We have a number of crews out there, and they have been hearing gunshots, dozens firsthand. Moments ago, Gabriella DeLuca heard shots fired. Gabriella, I could tell it was unnerving to be so close to that. How are you feeling, and what are you facing out there now? All right, so you've been listening in to the lead prosecutor and an FBI special agent speaking publicly for the first time in the Tree of Life synagogue shooting trial since jurors just about 2 hours ago sentenced Robert Bowers to death. We have crews all across the area, and one of our reporters, Gabriella DeLuca, did try to speak with the defense team. Let's listen in. And we're breaking back into programming with a major moment now. Families, survivors, and religious leaders are holding the first press conference following the death sentence handed down today in the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting trial. Yeah, and Gordon, we heard the word relief a lot. That was a theme. Many individuals acknowledging this may not be full closure, but that this is a sense of relief. It certainly does. And Channel 11 News anchor David Johnson is outside of the Jewish Community Center in Squirrel Hill tonight. David, you are a Squirrel Hill resident, a member of the Jewish community. I know you've been speaking with so many. This is a significant moment. Yeah, David, and it's important that you mention those resources because while today we heard that a lot of people feel relief and feel gratitude, there is still so much trauma. And one thing that's important to note here is there was no certain number of aggravating versus mitigating factors that they needed to choose or all unanimously agree on in order to reach the decision that they did. So they had a ton, more than 100, as you mentioned, of these mitigating factors, and they did agree, even unanimously in some cases, on some of those factors. Yes. But still, in the end, they ultimately made the decision that they did, which was a death sentence. Yeah. And you mentioned Audrey Glickman, and something that I found interesting. She said a life in prison would have meant that he would have been comfortable, and she said his needs would have been tended to, and we have to assume that that is something that the jury weighed as well when they made this decision and when they came forward with this sentencing, this death sentence. You know that over the years there have been survivors, there have been some family members who have expressed wanting a life sentence, but it does seem, and certainly from what we've heard today, that the vast majority of those impacted wanted this outcome.
A lot of different opinions, though, yes.
Yes, they wanted to see him sentenced to death, and that is what we saw after about 2 days, 10 hours total of deliberations. David, really, we have seen the community come together throughout the last 5 years. Love has truly overcome hate here, and want to mention, you know, you brought up Rabbi Myers, and something that stood out to me that he said was that in the Jewish calendar, today is a day of love, and he said he doesn't believe in coincidences. He says that he felt like they were embraced by the love of the judicial system, something that stood out. And David, you were outside of Tree of Life when this happened. I know I was as well, so many of us. But David, you are also a resident of Squirrel Hill. You are a member of the Jewish community. This really has to be a very full circle moment for you. All right, I'm sure we'll continue to see growing memorials outside there. Rich, thank you. And meanwhile, today's sentencing verdict just closes one chapter of this case. It will likely be years before there's any chance of Bowers actually being put to death.